Is it paranoia if you're right? The tiny glass circle of the peephole distorts the world, making the hallway a fisheye lens of muted yellows and dancing dust motes. Maya held her breath, pressing her eye against the cold metal, watching him. Julian, her new neighbor. He stood casually, a picture of effortless charm even in the dim light of the Argenta's third floor. He picked up the brown package resting against her doorframe, her name, Maya Lane, stark on the label. He tucked it under his arm. But then, his back to her, he walked away, not towards her door to deliver it, away, down the hall. The clack of his expensive shoes on the polished linoleum faded. The sound left a hollow echo in her chest, a tremor beneath the floorboards of her carefully constructed piece. It had been 3 months since the incident, 3 months since the world imploded, taking with it her sense of safety, her sense of self. Maya Lane had packed her life into boxes, leaving behind the ghost-haunted apartment and the city that had once felt like home. She sought refuge in the Argenta, an old building with a grand, if slightly faded, lobby in a new, bustling city. It wasn't perfect. The paint peeled in corners, the elevator groaned like a dying beast, and the walls were thin enough to carry the muffled conversations and strange midnight hums of her neighbors. But it had character, she told herself. It had high ceilings and wide windows that let in the autumn light, and it felt like a blank canvas, a fresh start. Her first week was a whirlwind of boxes and takeout. She was trying to build a new life, brick by painstaking brick, ignoring the persistent whisper of anxiety that always seemed to find her, even here. On day 5, the stack of boxes holding her entire collection of beloved classic novels chose the precise moment she opened her apartment door to collapse, scattering dozens of hardcovers across the hallway floor. She let out a frustrated gasp, dropping to her knees, the weight of the past few months pressing down on her again. "Need a hand there?" A voice, warm and smooth as good whiskey, cut through her disarray. She looked up, startled, to see him standing there. Julian. He was leaning against the doorframe of the apartment directly across from hers, number 304. Tall, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a smile that seemed to light up the dim hallway. He was dressed in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He didn't wait for an answer, simply knelt beside her, gathering books with an efficiency that was almost uncanny. "Maya, right? I'm Julian, from across the hall." He held out a copy of Wuthering Heights, its cover slightly bent. "Rough start to the new digs?" She managed a weak smile. "Something like that. Thanks. This is a mess." He waved it off. "Think nothing of it. We're neighbors. Gotta look out for each other, especially in a place like the Argenta. It's got its charms, but it definitely keeps you on your toes." He helped her stack the books neatly, his hands brushing hers once or twice, sending a jolt of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of harmless connection. Over the next few weeks, Julian became an unexpected and initially welcome presence. He was always there. If she was struggling with a heavy grocery bag, he'd materialize to offer a hand. If she mentioned a flickering light, he'd offer to take a look, tools in hand, before she even thought to call the building manager. He brought her coffee from the artisanal shop downstairs, remembered her order after only one mention, and always seemed to know when she needed a friendly face, a reassuring word. He was charming, attentive, and utterly perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. The first oddity was small, almost imperceptible. Maya swore she'd left her favorite ceramic mug, the chipped one her best friend Chloe had given her, on the kitchen counter that morning. But when she returned from work, it was in the drying rack by the sink, freshly washed. She shrugged it off, attributing it to a momentary lapse of memory, or perhaps she'd just been more tired than she thought. Then came the books. Her copy of Rebecca, a comfort read, had been on her nightstand. One evening, she reached for it, only to find it wasn't there. After a frantic search, she found it tucked away on a lower shelf of her bookshelf, spine inward, as if it had been deliberately hidden. Her breath caught in her throat. She lived alone. She had always been meticulously organized, a habit born from a need for control in a world that often felt chaotic. This wasn't her. A few days later, a strange, persistent flicker began in her living room lamp. It wasn't the dramatic, cinematic kind of flicker, but a subtle, almost imperceptible pulse, like a heartbeat just at the edge of her vision. She mentioned it to Julian in passing, during one of their hallway chats. He was instantly concerned. "That old wiring in the Argenta," he'd said, "a real pain. Let me take a look, Maya. I'm pretty good with electricals." He came over, humming a cheerful tune as he swiftly unscrewed the light fixture, fiddled with a few wires, and tightened everything back up. The flickering stopped. He gave her a triumphant grin. "Good as new. Told ya. Saved ya a call to Elias, and you know how long he takes." Elias was the building's reclusive handyman, a shadowy figure who seemed to exist purely on the periphery, rarely seen but always felt. Maya had been grateful for Julian's help, for his efficiency, yet a tiny, unsettling voice in the back of her mind wondered how he knew about the flickering light before she'd even had a chance to look at it properly herself, and how he'd fixed it so easily. Had he known about it already? She tried to push the thoughts away. It was just an old building. She was just stressed. This was a fresh start, not a repeat performance of her past anxieties. But the subtle events continued. Her keys, which she always hung on the hook by the door, would sometimes be found on the coffee table. A window she was certain she'd locked would be slightly ajar. Each time she tried to rationalize it, to blame her fatigue or her still adjusting mind, but the sense of unease, of a subtle intrusion, began to fester. Her best friend, Chloe, was the first to voice the doubts that Maya refused to acknowledge. Chloe, with her sharp wit and even sharper instincts, was Maya's anchor. They were on a video call, Chloe's face filling the screen. "So, this Julian guy," Chloe said, taking a sip of wine, "sounds a bit intense? Like, overly helpful? Isn't that a red flag?" Maya laughed, a brittle sound. "He's just really nice, Chloe. He's been a lifesaver, honestly. You have no idea how much I've appreciated having someone around after everything." "I do know," Chloe said gently, "and that's exactly why I'm asking. When you've been through what you have, you're more vulnerable. Someone who's perfect often isn't. Remember Mark? Before everything?" Maya winced. Mark had been another lesson learned the hard way. "Julian's not like that. He's just a good neighbor." She tried to sound convincing, but a sliver of Chloe's skepticism had already taken root. Julian, it seemed, had a way of bringing Chloe into their conversations even when she wasn't there. He'd ask about her, seemingly innocently, then slide in a comment. "Chloe seems very protective of you, doesn't she? It's sweet, but sometimes people mean well and just end up making things harder, filling your head with worries. Or, she seems a little too eager for you to leave the Argenta. Doesn't want you settling in here, perhaps?" Maya bristled at first, defending Chloe. But Julian's words were always so subtly phrased, so seemingly understanding of her struggles, that they began to chip away at her trust. Chloe was protective, maybe a little too protective. She was always trying to convince Maya to move back to their old city, to return to what she considered normal. It was easy to twist that into something possessive, something that undermined Maya's new independence. The calls with Chloe became strained. Chloe's questions about Julian grew more pointed, more insistent. Maya, feeling defensive and increasingly isolated, found herself snapping back. One evening, after Julian had fixed another strange occurrence, her alarm clock suddenly set to 3 a.m., blaring in the dead of night. Maya called Chloe, frazzled. "He's just so thoughtful, Chloe. He came right over when he heard it, even though it was the middle of the night. He's genuinely worried about me." "Maya, you sound exhausted," Chloe said, her voice laced with concern. "And you're blaming yourself for a clock setting itself? This is getting weird. Have you thought about getting out of there? Just for a weekend? Come stay with me." "Why does everyone always want me to run?" Maya shot back, her voice tight. "I'm not running from this. I'm building a life. You don't think I'm strong enough for that?" "Of course I do. But this Julian guy, I just don't like it. It's too much, too fast. He's getting in your head." "You're getting in my head!" Maya yelled, her voice echoing in the thin-walled apartment. She immediately regretted it, but the words were out. "You're making me feel paranoid when I'm finally starting to feel safe again." A beat of silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken accusations. "Maya," Chloe said, her voice dropping, "I'm just worried. If you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you." "Maybe you should just tell me when you decide to trust me again," Maya retorted and hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. She stared at her phone, a lump forming in her throat. She had pushed away her best friend. Julian, who had been across the hall and heard the raised voices, knocked softly moments later. He looked genuinely concerned, offering her a sympathetic ear and a cup of soothing chamomile tea. She felt a surge of gratitude and a deeper, more chilling sense of isolation. Now, with Chloe out of the picture, Julian's presence in her life became absolute. He was her confidant, her helper, her seemingly only friend in this new city. Her reality, once firm, began to blur at the edges. Objects continued to shift. A photo frame turned face down, a shower curtain subtly pulled back. Small things, easily dismissed, but cumulatively they hammered at her sanity. She started to question everything, her memory, her perception, her own mind. She found herself checking locks multiple times, peering through the peehole before opening her door, listening intently to the creaks and groans of the old building, wondering if the sounds were just the building settling, or something else, someone else. The Argenta, with its vintage charm, now felt like a labyrinth. The whispers from next door, barely audible, sometimes felt like they were coming from inside her own walls. Footsteps above and below her, the occasional clang of old pipes, all contributed to a suffocating symphony of paranoia. She slept poorly, waking to the slightest sound, convinced she heard something, someone, moving in her apartment. The air felt heavy, charged with an invisible presence. One late afternoon, bathed in the orange glow of a setting autumn sun, Maya was trying to read, but her eyes kept drifting to the smoke detector on her ceiling. It was a standard, innocuous disc, beige against the off-white paint. But something about it bothered her. Maybe it was the way it seemed to tilt ever so slightly, or the small, almost unnoticeable pinprick near the edge that seemed to catch the light in a peculiar way. She stared at it, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. Slowly, carefully, she found a step stool. Her hands were shaking as she climbed, reaching out for the detector. It felt lighter than she expected. She twisted it, and it came away from the ceiling with a soft click. Her breath hitched. Inside, nestled among the wires, a tiny lens gleamed back at her. A camera. Hidden. Recording. The world stopped. The vibrant autumn light draining from the window, leaving her apartment in a sudden, chilling twilight. The thin walls of the Argenta seemed to press in, suffocating her. Her mind reeled, replaying every single instance, the misplaced items, the flickering lights, the feeling of being watched, Chloe's warnings, Julian's perfect helpfulness. It wasn't paranoia. It was real, and it had been there, watching her, listening all along. A low, guttural cry escaped her lips. She dropped the detector, scrambling down from the stool. She had to get out, now. Her hands fumbled for her keys on the hook by the door, her eyes darting to every shadow, every corner of her apartment that was no longer hers. This wasn't her home. It was his stage. She wrenched open the door, her heart hammering. The hallway was empty. A moment of relief, quickly replaced by a fresh wave of terror as she heard a faint creak from across the hall. The sound of a door slowly closing. He knew. He had to know she knew. She turned to run, her feet barely touching the ground. But just as she reached the stairwell, a figure emerged from the shadows at the landing below, blocking her escape. Julian. His face, no longer charming, was a mask of cold calculation. He smiled. A slow, chilling smile that promised her nightmare was only just beginning. He stood there, a predator finally revealing himself from beneath the sheep's clothing. His smile was no longer charming, but a grotesque sneer that twisted his features into something unrecognizable, something predatory. He held a hand out, a gesture of mock invitation. "Running so soon, Maya? We were just getting to the good part." His voice was low, laced with a silky menace that made her blood run cold. Her heart clawed at her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but her legs felt like lead. The stairwell, once a path to freedom, now felt like a cage. Julian at the bottom, her apartment, his lair, behind her. The dim, flickering bulb above cast dancing shadows that stretched and shrank, making the hallway seem to breathe around them. She could hear her own ragged breaths, loud and ragged, in the sudden, terrifying silence. A faint creak from the floorboards above, a distant hum of the ancient elevator. Sounds that usually faded into the background, now screamed with unnatural clarity. She looked desperately for an escape, her eyes scanning the walls, the closed doors. Nowhere to go. Julian took a step, then another, slowly ascending towards her, his movements deliberate, like a cat toying with a mouse. "Don't be silly, Maya. This is your home, our home now, and we have so much left to explore." A choked sob caught in her throat. No, this wasn't home. This was a trap. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed past him, scrambling back up the stairs, ignoring his casual chuckle, ignoring the sudden grab he made at her arm that she narrowly dodged. Up, anywhere but here. She burst onto the 5th floor, gasping for air, her lungs burning. The hallway here was even dimmer, a service area she'd barely noticed before. A heavy fire door, rarely used, loomed at the far end. Hope, thin and desperate, flickered within her. She slammed her body against it, grappling with the stiff handle, her fingers numb with terror. It gave way with a groan, revealing a precipitous metal fire escape, rusted and precarious, leading down into the narrow, garbage-strewn alleyway behind the building. Fresh air, freedom. Almost. Behind her, Julian's voice, calm and clear, sliced through the night. "That's not going to work, Maya. Elias locked that a week ago. Said the hinges were unsafe. Remember? I told you Elias takes forever to fix things." The information hit her like a physical blow. Her hands froze on the cold, pitted metal. He knew. Of course he knew. He knew everything. She didn't remember him telling her that, but the insidious doubt was there, a corrosive acid in her mind. Had he told her? Had she forgotten? Or was he simply lying, twisting her perception once again? The thought paralyzed her for a split second, her confidence eroding even in this moment of extreme danger. She turned to face him, back pressed against the door. He was closer now, framed against the faint light from the main hallway, a dark silhouette. His eyes glinted in the gloom. "You see, Maya? You always forget the small details. But I remember. I remember everything about you." A sickening realization washed over her. He wasn't just observing her, he was studying her. Every habit, every flaw, every fear. He was like a spider, meticulously weaving a web around her, and she, blind and trusting, had walked right into it. The fire escape, the only way out, was a dead end. She was trapped on the 5th floor, a dark, dusty cul-de-sac. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She screamed then, a raw animal sound ripped from her throat. She hoped someone would hear, hoped someone would come. But the Argenta, with its thick, old walls, was a tomb. Her scream was swallowed, echoing only in her own ears, swallowed by the silence that followed. Julian only watched, his head cocked slightly to the side, a flicker of something almost amused in his eyes. She darted past him again, her movements clumsy, desperate. She ran down the hall, fumbling for door handles, anything that might open, anything that might offer sanctuary. Each one was locked, unyielding. The building felt like it was actively conspiring against her. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of old dust and mildew, a smell she now associated only with dread. Her breath hitched in her throat, burning her lungs. She threw herself down the main stairwell again, blindly, taking 2 steps at a time, her feet pounding. She heard his footsteps behind her, not hurried, just a steady, relentless pace. He wasn't chasing her, he was herding her. He knew where she was going. He knew her escape routes before she even formed them. She burst into the 2nd-floor landing, seeing the door to the basement, usually chained, now standing ajar. A sliver of darkness, a new path. It was a risk, a dive into the unknown, but it was a path. She didn't hesitate. She plunged into the cavernous gloom of the basement stairwell, the air instantly colder, heavier, smelling of damp concrete and something metallic. The sounds of the building faded, replaced by the thrum of unseen machinery, the distant drip of water, and the ominous silence of the deep. Her hand skimmed along the rough concrete wall as she descended, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The stairs ended in a vast, sprawling space, a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, forgotten storage rooms, and the hulking, ancient boiler. Steam hissed from somewhere above, adding to the oppressive atmosphere. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling in the distance cast long, dancing shadows that stretched into grotesque shapes, making the forgotten corners seem to writhe with hidden horrors. "Going somewhere, Maya?" Julian's voice echoed, distorted and eerie, from the stairwell above. He wasn't even trying to hide his presence anymore. He was enjoying this. The realization fueled a new kind of terror, a cold, clinical dread that settled deep in her stomach. He wanted her to suffer. She pressed herself against a cold pipe, trying to blend into the shadows, her breath catching in her throat. The smell of dust, stagnant water, and ancient machinery filled her nostrils. She could hear his footsteps now, descending the stairs, slow and deliberate. Each step a hammer blow to her already fragile nerves. He paused at the bottom, his silhouette framed in the dim light. He looked around, a slow, appraising gaze, as if admiring his arena. Come out, wherever you are," he crooned, his voice dripping with mock playfulness. The sound scraped at her sanity. "We can do this the easy way, or the hard way. And trust me, Maya, the hard way is not going to be fun for you." She clamped a hand over her mouth, trying to silence the desperate whimpers that threatened to escape. The metal pipe pressed cold against her back. She could feel the vibrations of the building, the low hum of the boiler, the frantic beat of her own heart. She heard him moving, deliberately, slowly, weaving through the maze of old furniture and forgotten appliances, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He was playing with her, extending the torture. Suddenly, a low, guttural voice hissed from the shadows right beside her, startling her so violently she almost screamed. "Quiet, girl." She whipped her head around, her eyes wide with terror, expecting Julian. Instead, she saw him, Elias, the reclusive handyman. He was hunkered down behind a pile of old wooden crates, his face grimy, his eyes, usually half hidden by his perpetual scowl, now sharp and alert in the dim light. He held a heavy wrench in his hand, a crude but effective weapon. He looked exactly as she remembered him from the few fleeting glimpses she'd caught, a man carved from the very griminess of the building itself, a living shadow. He smelled of oil, sweat, and something vaguely metallic. He wasn't a comforting presence, but in that moment, he was not Julian. And that was everything. He put a finger to his lips, urging silence, then gestured with his head towards a narrow opening between two stacks of ancient rusting pipes. "This way, quick!" Without a second thought, Maya squeezed through the tight space. The metal scraped against her clothes, cold and unforgiving. Elias followed, his larger frame making a scraping sound as he maneuvered through. She heard Julian's voice, closer now, a triumphant note in it. "Ah, I see a shadow. Found you, Maya." But they were already deeper in a narrower, darker corridor that seemed to snake its way through the very foundations of the Argenta. The air was even colder here, laden with the smell of damp earth and decay. Elias moved with a practiced ease, clearly knowing every twist and turn of this subterranean maze. He was leading her, not to freedom, but to a different kind of hiding place. "He's been watching you," Elias grunted, his voice a low rumble that barely carried above the distant hum of the building. "Saw him for weeks. He's not like the others. Too neat, too quiet, always lurking." Maya wanted to ask how long, wanted to know if he knew about the camera, about everything, but there was no time. Julian's footsteps were louder now, echoing behind them. Elias stopped abruptly in front of a heavy, rusted metal door, almost invisible against the concrete wall. He fumbled with a keyring, selecting a large, ancient brass key. "This here," he whispered, "is my bolt hole. He won't find us in here, not for a while, anyway." He turned the key with a groan and a click, pushing the door open just enough for them to slip through. The room inside was small, even darker, illuminated only by a faint, diffused light from a tiny grate high on the wall. It smelled heavily of old oil and something else, something herbal and bitter. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, dust-covered workbenches lined the walls. This was Elias's sanctuary, his forgotten corner of the world. They squeezed inside, Elias closing the door silently behind them, then sliding a heavy metal bolt into place with a soft thud. The sudden silence was absolute, broken only by their ragged breathing. Julian's footsteps, which had been so close, faded, replaced by a frustrated grunt from the other side of the wall. He was close, but he was outside. Maya sank against the cold concrete, trembling, her legs weak. Relief, sharp and painful, washed over her, threatening to buckle her. She was safe, for now. Why are you helping me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Elias shrugged, leaning against a workbench, the wrench still clutched in his hand. His eyes scanned the door, listening. "He messed with my work, broke the third-floor heating last week, said it was faulty wiring. I know better. He was in your apartment setting that alarm clock." His voice was gruff, devoid of empathy, but there was a deep-seated irritation there, a violation of his ordered world. And he's a snake. Seen his kind before, always charming the new ones. He paused, listening again. "He tried to get me fired, too. Told the manager I was slacking off, letting things go to rot. Said I was seeing things. But I know what I saw. Him. Always around your door. Always watching." A flicker of something in his eyes, a glint of resentment. Julian had underestimated Elias, dismissing him as the eccentric, silent handyman. And that was his mistake. A faint scratching sound came from the other side of the door. Julian, testing it, probing. Maya flinched, but Elias held up a hand. "Heavy steel. He won't get through without making a racket, and the manager will hear that." He wasn't wrong. The Argenta was old, but its foundations were solid. "I need to call Chloe," Maya said, finding her voice again, pulling her phone from her pocket, her fingers still shaking. "She warned me. She'll know what to do." She remembered the last call, her harsh words, the way she'd pushed her best friend away. The guilt was a fresh wound, but it fueled her determination. She had to make it right. She had to get out. She dialed Chloe's number, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and desperate hope. It rang once, twice, then Chloe's voice, laced with worry. "Maya, are you okay? I've been calling you for hours. I knew something was wrong when you hung up like that. I'm actually outside your building right now. I was so worried." A sob of pure relief tore through Maya. "Chloe, here, now. Chloe, he's here. Julian, he put a camera in my apartment. He's been watching me. He tried to trap me. I'm in the basement with Elias, the handyman. He's outside this room." The words tumbled out, breathless, frantic. Chloe's voice went cold, hard. "Stay calm, Maya. I'm calling the police. Don't move. Don't let him in. I'm coming to you. Tell Elias to keep you safe." The connection was unstable, cutting in and out, but the message was clear. Hope, strong and vibrant, began to bloom in Maya's chest. She wasn't alone, not anymore. She relayed Chloe's message to Elias. He grunted, a flicker of something almost like approval in his eyes. Good. About time someone dealt with that creep. He moved towards a heavy metal locker, pulling out an even larger, heavier crowbar. He was ready. Outside the door, Julian was no longer subtly testing. He was speaking, his voice clearer now, amplified by the thin metal. "Maya, I know you're in there. Don't be foolish. You really think that old fool can protect you? He's just as much of a broken piece of this building as you are." His words were aimed at Elias now, a new target for his venom. "It's just a misunderstanding, darling. Come out, we can talk about this. No one has to get hurt." The sugary tone was back, but it was a thin veneer over raw fury. He started rattling the door, a series of dull thuds against the steel. He was getting desperate. He knew Chloe was coming, knew his time was running out. "He's panicking," Elias observed, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Good." Suddenly, there was a commotion from the stairwell. Shouts, heavy footsteps. Not Julian's. Louder, more numerous. And then, Chloe's voice, clear and strong, cutting through the basement gloom. "Julian, stop it! The police are on their way!" A moment of stunned silence from Julian. Then, a snarl of pure rage. He must have realized he was truly cornered. He wasn't expecting Chloe. He wasn't expecting anyone. "You interfering bitch!" Julian yelled, his voice raw with fury. "You ruined everything!" The rattling on the door stopped. Maya heard a scuffle, a grunt, then the sound of a heavy blow. "Chloe!" Maya screamed, pushing against the door, desperate to get out. Elias held her back, his grip surprisingly strong. "Wait, don't go out there blindly. He's dangerous. Let him make the first move." The sounds of struggle intensified. Elias looked at Maya, his expression grim. "We need to get to him before he hurts her, but we need a plan." He scanned the small room, his eyes falling on the ancient clanking boiler. A plan formed. "The boiler room is further in," he said, gesturing to a narrow opening behind the main boiler itself. "If we can draw him in there, it's a dead end. We can trap him." His eyes met hers, a silent question. Was she ready to face him? She nodded, her jaw tight, fear still gnawing at her, but replaced by a burning resolve. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was fighting back. Elias kicked open a floor panel, revealing a tangle of pipes and valves. "I can vent the steam, blind him, create a diversion. You need to get Chloe and lure him into that back room. I'll follow. When he's in, we seal him." It was a risky, desperate plan, relying on the labyrinthine nature of the basement and the element of surprise. But it was their only chance. With a final shared glance, Elias nodded, and then, with a mighty shove, he unbolted the door. It burst open, revealing not Julian, but Chloe, her hair disheveled, a bruise already forming on her cheek, but her eyes blazing with defiance. Julian was a few feet away, snarling, about to lunge again. "Chloe, this way!" Maya screamed, grabbing her friend's hand and pulling her into the hidden room. Elias, crowbar ready, stood guard for a split second, meeting Julian's furious gaze. "You old fool!" Julian roared, charging forward. Elias waited until Julian was almost upon him. Then, with surprising agility for a man his age, he ducked aside, swinging the heavy crowbar. It connected with a sickening thud against Julian's shoulder. "Now!" Elias yelled, pointing towards the boiler room. "Get him in there!" Chloe, her own fear momentarily forgotten in her anger, understood immediately. "Julian, come on! You're not getting away with this!" she taunted, deliberately retreating towards the narrow opening behind the boiler. Julian, disoriented by the blow and blinded by rage, fell for it. He chased them, convinced he had them cornered, unaware of the trap. He plunged into the small, dark room, following Chloe. Maya, her heart pounding, stood at the entrance. Elias was already at the valves, twisting them open. A loud whoosh filled the air as steam began to billow from the pipes, filling the small boiler room with a blinding white fog. Julian screamed, disoriented. Chloe, knowing what was coming, had already ducked behind a large piece of machinery, pulling Maya with her. "Now!" Elias yelled. With a superhuman effort born of pure terror and adrenaline, Maya and Chloe shoved the heavy steel door of the boiler room shut. It groaned on its hinges. Julian was inside, screaming, thrashing against the thick steam. The sounds of his rage, muffled but terrifying, reverberated through the metal. Elias quickly fumbled with a heavy chain, wrapping it around the handles, securing them with a padlock he produced from his pocket. The clinking of the chain, the metallic snap of the lock, sealed Julian's fate. They had him, trapped. From somewhere above, faintly at first, then growing steadily louder, came the wail of police sirens. Justice. Relief. A wave of overwhelming exhaustion washed over Maya, and she sagged against Chloe, tears streaming down her face. Chloe held her tight, rubbing her back, murmuring reassurances. Elias, silent as ever, watched the locked door, his face grim, but a certain satisfaction in his eyes. He had settled an old score. The police swarmed the basement moments later, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, their voices barking orders. Maya, Chloe, and Elias emerged from the shadows, Maya trembling but alive, her ordeal finally over. Julian's furious screams from within the boiler room provided all the evidence they needed. Months later, the city hummed a different tune. Not the ominous, claustrophobic symphony of the Argenta, but the gentle, reassuring rhythm of a new beginning. Maya Lane sat in a sun-drenched living room, the walls painted a soft, optimistic cream. Wide windows overlooked a vibrant park, green and alive. No dark corners, no thin walls, no whispers. This was home, her home. Purchased with an insurance payout from the traumatic past, a silver lining she was still learning to accept. She'd spent weeks in therapy, slowly piecing herself back together, confronting the gaslighting, the manipulation, the terrifying erosion of her reality. Chloe had been an unwavering pillar, her fierce loyalty a balm to Maya's shattered trust. Elias had disappeared back into the shadows of the Argenta, his part played, a silent guardian moving on. Julian was in custody, his trial pending, his carefully constructed facade finally shattered for the world to see. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Chloe, on a video call, her face smiling from the screen. "Hey, how's the new setup?" Maya smiled back. A genuine, easy smile she hadn't realized she'd lost. "It's perfect, Chloe. Absolutely perfect. I even have a security system this time. Top of the line. Motion sensors, cameras, everything." She gestured vaguely towards a small, almost invisible camera nestled in the corner of the ceiling. "No more surprises." Chloe chuckled. "Good. You deserve every bit of peace you can get. I'm so glad you're finally safe." "Me too," Maya said, a deep sense of calm settling over her. "It's really over. I feel free." They talked for a while longer, about mundane things, about plans for the future. The weight that had crushed Maya for so long had finally lifted. The past was behind her. As she ended the call, a contented sigh escaped her lips. She stretched, then walked towards the small, sleek monitor on her wall, the hub for her new security system. Old habits, however, died hard. She still found herself checking, just to be sure. A quick glance at the live feeds. The front door, the back door, the windows, the living room. All clear, all safe. Her finger hovered over the screen, about to switch it off. A final, reassuring ritual before settling down with a book. The image on the screen, her living room, perfectly still and empty, flickered, just for a microsecond. A glitch, a tiny, almost imperceptible blip in the otherwise smooth feed. But in that fractional moment, in that single frame, The empty living room wasn't empty. A face, Julian's face, smiling, a slow, knowing, triumphant smile, looking directly into the camera. His eyes, cold and sharp, meeting hers through the screen, through time, through her new life. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The feed was back to normal, empty, still. The sun streamed through the window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. The room was peaceful, serene. Maya stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat, a cold, icy dread spreading through her veins. Her heart, which had just found peace, began to pound a frantic, terrifying rhythm. She blinked, once, twice. It had to be a trick of the light, a hallucination, her mind playing tricks. But she knew, deep in her gut, where the terror had always resided, she knew. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just found a new home, her home, and he was still watching.